everybody. Jason Morris here, the director of the Go School of Real Estate, alongside who I call the cool cat instructor, or the instructor of cool sometimes. Mr. Rob Grantmeyer from the Go School is also with us today. Hello, Mr. Rob Grantmeyer, cool cat instructor.
Hello, Jason. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. So, to our audience out there, this is part of a series that we here at the Go School of Real Estate consider or refer to as Five Things. And this series is taking topics from course exams that are most often missed by students. So, again, we have analyzed the topics or specific questions from course exams and want to kind of expand on those in a short, brief video for each of those topics. These aren't going to be the actual exam questions, but the concept or the topic itself is what makes up the exam questions. And these are, again, the questions that we see students missing most often. So we thought we would do this series here on YouTube and call it Five Things. And then particularly today's video is Five Things You Need to Know About Buyer Agency Agreements. So that is our focus for today, buyer agency agreements. And the reason I wanted to talk about this too, in addition, well, perhaps one of the reasons why this topic, along with a very close or accompanying topic, which is seller agency agreements, talking about sellers, but today we're specifically talking about buyers. Is because many students get these mixed up with other types of contracts. In fact, I don't even really use the word contract as often when I'm talking about agency. I use the word agreements. I don't know about you, Rob. Do you typically use agreements or contracts?
I would lean towards agreements. It's nice to kind of draw a line between agency agreements and purchase contracts, because if you're not careful, they can bleed together in your head,
Right.
and you can start mixing up what goes to what's important about each one. So agency agreements, of course, are between the client and the firm. Usually it's the firm, whereas the purchase agreement will be between a buyer and a seller, that type of thing. So I prefer agreements myself.
Yeah, just like you said, to help kind of differentiate or draw that dotted line, because again, I do believe that's what happens among students taking exams, is they kind of bleed those together, those topics together, of the purchase contract, which is a major part of the exam, both the course exam and the licensing exam here in North Carolina, as well as basic contract law. That's a big part, but specifically what we're concentrating on in this particular area, and as you will when you're in the class, are buyer agency or seller agency agreements. That is, having that relationship with either a buyer or a seller as their agent. So again, let's talk about those five things specifically. Now, of course, Rob, as you know, there are more than five, right? In fact, as we were preparing for this video, we were coming up with all kinds of other things that we could talk about, but we're going to keep it short and simple with this series. Hopefully under 15 minutes or less for each video, and just really hit the high level topics about these topics. So let's start with number one. Types of buyer agency contracts. So there's, and see, I use the word contracts here, so I'm really going to confuse our audience, but just know that they can be used interchangeably. Again, though, we're talking about the relationship of agency and not, again, a contract to purchase property, which is between a buyer and a seller, where this is between the real estate firm and specifically the agent representing that firm and the buyer in this case. So types of buyer agency agreements or contracts, we have basically two different kinds, right, Rob? Big different from sellers, where we have multiple, we have more than two. We have at least four that I can think of off the top of my head in terms of listing agreements, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about buyer agency agreements, and it's pretty simple, self-explanatory. We've got a non-exclusive type and an exclusive type. What do you say the differences are there, Rob, without assuming that our audience doesn't know?
Well, the biggest difference is, I look at it from a standpoint, the people who are mainly going to watch this video are the folks who are going to be buyer agents. And as a buyer agent, you certainly want an exclusive agreement with that buyer, because I started out in this business when I was really young. I was like Jason's age when I started out. I was early 20s and, right out of college. And I made a lot of bad decisions working with buyers without having an exclusive buyer agency agreement. And nothing malicious on their part, but sometimes they treated me like I was a bit of a tour guide. Let's go look. We might be moving to Wilmington. We might not. Go show us 25 houses and we might decide to buy something. Well, that's not necessarily the best use of your time, because if you're showing properties to someone who might not buy something, you may have missed out on somebody who really needs to buy something and is ready, willing, and able to buy something. And so, as the real estate broker, you're definitely going to lean towards exclusive, sooner the better, so that you can make sure that if they buy something during the 30, 60, 180 days that you have an agreement with them for, you deserve to get paid. Contrary to popular opinion, we're not, most of us are not salaried. Most of us are not on any type of, the government doesn't pay us to just go out and show people houses whenever they feel like it. We get paid a success fee essentially for, for closing on the transaction. We get paid for closing on the transaction. That could be a separate success fee paid directly by our buyer, but it's usually paid by the seller. And so you could find yourself doing a lot of work and spinning a lot of wheels literally without any compensation. And so the sooner you can learn how to do that and protect yourself, the better.
Yeah, because in a non-exclusive, as the title says, the buyer could work with you, but also could be working with other agents and other brokerages. And it's really kind of a race to whomever can find this property first, or procure the sale first, among other agencies and again brokerages. So much better protection under an exclusive agency. But just know, again, for testing purposes, there are two different types. There are some differences in terms of compensation. And one other good point about the exclusive type is that second bullet point there on your screen. Essentially, all agents are with that firm hired by the buyer become sub-agents. So again, you have to remember, as a buyer client, you are hiring the firm and everyone that comes with that. You're going to have one exclusive agent that's representing you and your best interests, but really you're also getting the benefits and the resources of the entire firm within that exclusive agency agreement. So definitely a benefit to not only you as an agent, but also the buyer, really.
Yes.
All right, let's move on to number 2. In terms of those 5 things that we need to know about buyer agency agreement. So what must be expressed in an oral agreement versus written agreement? So this is kind of introducing or adding to what you alluded to, Rob, about an oral agreement. Basically, we're implying here, right, that there can be an oral agreement, a non-exclusive agreement can be oral. It doesn't have to be written right from the onset. Unlike a exclusive agency, which we just talked about being more of the more beneficial for both the agent and the client, that has to be in writing from the onset, but also include what you see here on the screen here. On the right side, you've got the written agreement that has to have a definite expiration date. And there's no such thing as an auto renewal situation when it comes to these types of agreements. That's one of the things you're going to need to look for in test questions. Is the word auto renewal does not go along with agency agreements. An agency agreement in this case, particularly a written agency agreement for buyer relationships, has to have that definite expiration date. You're going to have your agency agreement contain the anti-discriminatory language prescribed by NCREC rule in a clear and conspicuous manner. If you're using the standard forms that come along with your membership to the Realtors Association, for example, this language is already going to be there. But if you're having an attorney draft a specific agency type agreement to use, then again, this is something that must be included. Pretty obvious as well, you're going to have it signed by all parties. As Rob mentioned earlier on, the parties of an agency agreement are the buyer in this case, because we're talking buyer's agency, and the firm. Remember always that the client belongs to the firm. Now you, as a representative, as an agent of that firm, are representing the firm and therefore exclusively assigned to that buyer. So you can, of course, be that signature when it says all signed parties. But remember again that that is between the firm / you, the agent, and the buyer in this case. And then finally, there on the far right side, the bottom bullet there, it must include the individual broker's license number. So you will undoubtedly come across a question, whether it's in the course or on the licensing exam, that asks you to identify what are the required components of all agency agreements, whether you're using that standard form as a member of the Realtors Association or not. These are at a minimum what must be included. An oral agreement, on the other hand, on the left side, as you see, as long as you are at least or minimally talking about with the client how you're going to be compensated, they need to understand that. What are the compensation issues around your relationship? And then also whether or not that client is authorizing dual agency should that situation arrive. Now, if you're watching this video and you're like thinking, okay, what's dual agency? Well, that's a whole nother video series, right, Rob? We don't want to kind of derail here and go too much into dual agency, but do definitely check out some other videos on that topic. But again, those are at a minimum what you need to have expressed in an oral version of your buyer agency agreement. You haven't reduced it to writing just yet. And then again, on the right side, you see there at a minimum what should be included in any written agency agreement. Anything else to add to that, Rob? Did I capture everything?
I would just spin a little bit of why into the oral agreement. Compensation is important because, like I said, we're not paid by the Gov. We're not paid by HGTV or anything like that. Chip and Joanna don't sign our paychecks. And so that'd be nice though. But but we're paid usually by the seller, but occasionally by the buyer. That's I call it one of the great myths of real estate.
Yes.
And I tell my students, you won't even get through your first day in the office without hearing someone basically tell a white fib lie and say, buyers never pay their buyer agent. Well, they usually don't, but there are situations where they do. So if I'm going to spend my next 3 weekends showing property to somebody, it's fair to both of us for me to explain that usually I'm compensated by the seller, but there may be circumstances where you, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, I'm going to expect you to compensate me directly. So that's why the Real Estate Commission wants us to address compensation at the beginning. They don't want it to be just, we'll figure it out later. We'll figure that out when we cross that bridge when we get there. Let's talk about it now so that they understand it's better for all of us to have this discussion at the beginning. And as far as dual agency, that's pure mechanics of that is if a buyer's not interested in dual agency or they would prefer avoid dual agency, then we can't show any of my company's listings. I used to affiliate with a company in Wilmington that had 800 agents and at any time, almost that many listings. And so if I'm going to be showing you property and you're not interested in dual agency, we need to avoid looking at my company's listings. And that's important to know at the beginning. So that's why they really emphasize that. I've noticed they've made a bigger push on this because I think for years, buyer agents thought this was just stuff we could figure out later. Let's just go get in the car, put some Barry Manilow on, go look at some music. I mean, go look at some houses, listen to some music, go look at some houses, and whatever. But we don't want that. The Real Estate Commission is very clear. If you watch their videos, we want this agreement at the beginning, at least a conscious understanding from both parties that I'm going to be your agent. I'm going to owe you fiduciary duties. You may have to compensate me directly in some circumstances. And let's talk about what dual agency is so that we know that we don't want to put you in a situation where you feel uncomfortable.
Right. And again, ahead of going and listening to Zabari and showing some houses all before.
Correct.
Right? Let's get this
Correct.
done right now. Let's talk about this.
Don't put the Barry Manilow on until we have a conscious agreement, right. Conscious verbal agreement of how we're going to proceed.
Right. Absolutely. Very good, sir. Thank you. And number 3, in terms of 5 things you guys need to know about, is when must an agency agreement be in writing? And I actually kind of jumped the gun just on that previous slide there and talked a little bit about it, but let's review. So again, for the exclusive relationship, it's got to be in writing from the onset. You know, again, If they want your exclusive representation, you as the agent and the brokerage firm that you're affiliated with, and that has to be in writing from that moment. So again, that's an important thing to remember. And again, a topic that you will see written in some way on a course test question or a licensing exam test question. Does exclusive relationships, can an exclusive relationship, that is, be oral from the beginning? And the answer is absolutely not. You do not get exclusivity with an oral agreement. So again, that has to be in writing using, again, possibly the standard form as a member of the Realtors Association, or a form that was drafted by an attorney, but not anything drafted by you, the licensed agent. There's a little insight on another topic that's to come, but for non-exclusive, you can start out with an oral buyer agency agreement again, but after you've listened to the Barry Manilow soundtrack and seen a few homes and found the one, you are going to need to reduce that oral agreement now into writing prior to presenting an offer on the one, that house that you found with your agent. Your agent is again going to have to now take what you have agreed upon orally and then add to that in a written agreement before the offer is made. So that's going to be a key thing here, is that before an offer is made and presented to the other side, you've got to have that in writing now. No longer can you continue that oral agreement only and have your agent present an offer for you. Anything else to add there, Rob?
Not too much. I just say a common term I've heard used by real estate teachers and real estate trainers is written buyer agency is kind of like what they say, put a ring on it, put a ring on that finger.
I say
Because we're you say that, right?
Yeah.
It's my friend Casey, who's also a big YouTube star, says it as well in one of her videos. And that's pretty much what you're doing. You know, you can show a few properties, but I've personally been burned. Spent a whole weekend with not really a family, but a husband and wife. Well, yeah, they'd be a family, but their kids weren't with us. But spent a whole weekend with them back in the day when I was just starting out. Didn't get anything in writing, and sure enough, they went and hired, or not hired, but used another agent who they were friends with from another city to make that offer on their behalf. Nothing I could do about it. If you don't have it in writing from the beginning, then there's nothing exclusive about it. And sometimes I think some agents say maybe show one property for not a free showing, but maybe a get to know you property, a first date, to steal another one of Jason's phrases there. A first date, we'll go look at a property or two. But if I'm going to be committing days and of my time to you, I'm going to probably not want to do that without a pre-qualification scenario, which is a separate video, but also an exclusive buyer agency agreement.
Yeah. I have a 5 dates rule,
I like it.
maximum of 5 dates before you put a ring on it, or before you have to put a ring on it now.
And that's pretty generous. Jason's a nice
I know,
guy. There's agents out there who are not that generous. They're a one date and let's do it or don't do it,
Now, most of my principals, most of my clients, we hit it off after the first date. And
right.
So we go ahead and commit, right? But there, like you said, it's almost like an interview in a way, an employment interview, or you're courting someone, if I may, because it's one of the sayings I've often heard in practice is some of the best clients you have are the ones that you don't have, or some of the best clients out there are the ones you don't have, meaning that maybe you're not the best match to enter into an agency relationship with that person. So you kind of figure that out during the dates. And by dates, we're really talking about showings and spending some time in meetings, assessment meetings and things like that. But yeah, 5 dates. Oh, wow. I don't know if you just heard that, but it's extremely thundering and storming outside. So I may have some background noise on that storm, but hopefully not too bad. Let's take a look at number 4. How can a buyer's agency agreement be terminated? So again, this is where many students get confused about when a purchase contract can be terminated and when an agency agreement can be terminated. So make sure that you know the differences here. That's why we added this particular topic to our 5 things list on buyer's agency. So for oral buyer agency, remember this is an exclusive. So I can basically tell my agent that I want to break up. The dates aren't going well, and I'm just going to go ahead and move on, right? Nothing really to terminate so much there, other than just making sure that you're communicating. Broken up by text could work here. Rob, that's never happened to you though, right? Broken up by text or anything like that.
No.
On the flip side, though, on the right side of your screen, you've got reasons how an exclusive buyer agency agreement could be terminated. I wouldn't say, and Rob and I were discussing this prior to going live on our video, I wouldn't say this is an all-inclusive list of ways that a buyer agency agreement could be terminated, but at a minimum, an exclusive buyer agency agreement would be terminated upon the expiration date. No brainer there. Remember what we said earlier, what must be included in an exclusive buyer agency agreement. The form itself, it must include a definite expiration date. No auto renewal. Worth repeating, no auto renewal on these agency agreements. So again, it's going to be terminated upon that termination date unless you renew it with the mutual consent of all parties. You can renew it before the expiration date, but again, it will always have another end date. Perhaps, as the second bullet point shows there, you found the property and you closed on it. You guys performed your job. And the relationship essentially doesn't necessarily come to an end, as you'll learn in practice. You actually maintain your relationships with your principals and clients beyond closing. But in terms of the formal paperwork side of things and the agreement side of things, once you close on the property, or once your client or principal closes on the property, then that agreement that you guys had ends. And then, of course, you can both mutually agree, that being you, the agent, or the firm that you represent, I should say, and your client or principal, you can come to a mutual agreement to end your buyer agency agreement. But do note that it has to be a mutual agreement. And as I just stumbled on with my words, it's got to be the firm. You have to, again, remember that the client slash principal belongs to the firm. So therefore, I, as an agent of the firm that I am affiliated with, can't make the sole decision to terminate our agreement with my client. It has to be approved by my firm, more specifically, my broker in charge of that firm. So keep that in mind. That is, a termination form cannot be essentially decided on or signed by just the agent alone. It's got to include the firm, because there might be an opportunity to, if it's not working out between me and the client, then maybe perhaps there's someone better that can meet their needs that is also affiliated with my firm. And so that's part of why, again, it must be mutually agreed upon there. But again, understanding when an agency agreement, in this particular case, a buyer's agency agreement, can be terminated. Finally, number 5 out of our 5 things you need to know about buyer agency agreements, is, when do I, as a buyer's agent, earn my fee? When do I get paid, or how do I get paid? What say you, Rob? You said that HGTV isn't paying us. The government doesn't pay us a stipend of any kind. How do I get paid? When do I earn my fee or my commission?
Sure, yeah, earning our fee. Hopefully, we do what I call mission accomplished.
Mission
That
accomplished.
was our second bullet point a second ago. It was, how do we end agency? Well, the way I hope we end this is mission accomplished.
We did our job, right?
We did our job. We procured a property described in the agency agreement that the buyer agrees to purchase by enforceable contract. We locate that property. We make an offer. Of course, we have a written buyer agency agreement first. We make an offer on it. We negotiate. We get under contract. We proceed through the due diligence period, and we make it all the way to the touchdown of closing. So that's a great way. And frankly, that's the overwhelming majority of the ways, of the circumstances where you're going to be paid as a buyer agent. Is, I like to tell my students, it's, when money changes hands, when a big swath of money changes hands, there's usually something in that for us. if no money changes hands, if no ownership changes hands, it's not extremely likely that we're going to get paid. And so hopefully bullet point number one, we've done our job. Been able to assist you with sourcing out the best property for you. We've helped you negotiate the best possible terms, and we've got you all the way to the closing table. And congratulations, you're now a new homeowner, or bought your second home, third home, fourth home, whatever there.
Best part of our job, right?
It's a great part of the job for sure.
Absolutely. And then, of course, some other things to keep in consideration is you have to have a current real estate license. This goes back to the first section of the course syllabus, basically. Who needs a license? Who doesn't need a license? Well, if you want to get paid for your actions performed during a real estate transaction, you have to have a current real estate license. So do remember that. That comes up even more so when we start talking about licensing law and rules. But it's worth noting too that perhaps if your license does go inactive for whatever reason, you could still get paid as long as your license again was active during that actual brokerage activity. So if you were inactive during the brokerage activity, whether you knew it or not, some people out there really don't even realize they've gone inactive, and yet they still practice. Eek, doesn't like that. But anyway, you do forfeit any compensation if you are performing transactional duties in an inactive status. So do make sure to keep that license status active. And then finally, of course, there has to be a valid written buyer agency agreement. What we are talking about today, keywords in there: valid, written, and then of course that buyer agency contract or agreement. So that is how you earn the fee. Again, these are questions about buyer agency agreements that you will encounter, at least in the course exam, and most likely on the licensing exam, as this is a big area of the test, according to the syllabus. Again, my name is Jason Morris, director of the Go School, alongside instructor Rob Grantmeyer. The Go School, again, located in North Carolina. If you have any questions about anything we've talked about today, feel free to reach out to us via email. Our email address is info@goschool.biz. And be sure to keep looking at our YouTube channel for additional videos, specifically among the 5 Things series. And we'll be talking about other topics as we continue adding to the series. Thanks again for joining us. Rob, thanks for your help on this one. We'll see you again next time.